Right, I'd like to talk about culture in the world of Elite Dangerous and how that plugs into all the different aspects of the game and why some of the things in the game are the way they are. So I'll start off about, you're a pilot in the game, you've got your ship, and I'm sure people have noticed, especially as it's sort of clearer now. Now we've got the faces in since 2.1, the people that you interact with, that actually they're a bit cool towards you. That the standard, what we call the neutral stance, is actually slightly negative. And the logic for that is, if you imagine a gigantic galaxy full of people who are travelling around, quite a lot of players don't stay in one place all the time. They tend to travel around a lot. They're quite itinerant. And if you think back to the history of Earth, for example, through the Middle Ages and later, generally itinerant populations are strongly disliked by the locals. And that's because there's almost no accountability. So if people are only here for a while and then move on, there is an assumption they can get away with anything. So the assumption is that the default assumption with pilots, if they don't recognise them, is that they're up to no good. They're travelling around. In fact, it's already in we've talked about the different, piracy being one of the key things that players can engage in, which isn't exactly necessarily a respectable profession. I mean, yes, we look at Robin Hood and all this sort of thing, but actually, historically, pirates have generally been after themselves. The cuddly, friendly attitude of Pirates of the Caribbean, I think it wasn't quite like that. They were killing each other in gruesome ways, rather horribly. But anyway, to come back to Elite Dangerous, I think the key thing is that there is that sort of level of distrust. So I'm just really explaining the background, why people are cool and standoffish until they've seen you 2, 3, 4, 5 times, where they'll welcome you back. They will start to give you more missions that they're going to trust you for, if you see what I mean, like, hey, take this here, and all, that things of higher value and things with bigger rewards. And so that's the sort of the background behind the reasoning behind why the system is the way they are. Basically, it's an understandable distrust of itinerant populations that we've seen through history, and that's not reflecting at all necessarily on that population. It's just the way people are, the way we have been brought up culturally. So the premise behind the Empire in Elite Dangerous is essentially a glorified Oregon Trail type wagon train headed off nearly a millennium ago. And went as far as they possibly could, and then chose this gorgeous planet to settle on, which had life on it, which they promptly knocked out. I mean, intelligent life. That's in this, but then they settled there, and that came out later, and there was lots of controversy. But the point is, with that sort of thing, is how would that pan out? Would people in that frame of mind, seeing somewhere wonderful to settle, they would take it? In many, if you look at the friction between the Native American Indians and the settlers coming in, but the Native Americans basically got ousted by better technology, and I'm sure that will happen in what is effectively our future if we met other sentient life that was less technologically advanced than us. So anyway, the point is that they would want to set up a society that was very different to what they've run away from. And patronage actually naturally emerges from a sort of a family-based or a system where there's relatively little governance, but then could become formalized like it was in Roman times, where there are responsibilities both ways, where you don't have, there's lots and lots of background behind it within the game that will gradually come out more and more in time. We're just seeing very much the top level, but where each strata in society has a formal way of getting into that position, where essentially someone called a patron has a number of citizens below them, and those sort of vote for that patron essentially by sort of slinging their hook with them. And then similarly that goes all the way up to the senators, who in turn form a senate which controls the way the empire works, led by the emperor. And so you don't have voting, you don't have elections, but what people can do is if they don't like what a particular senator's doing, they can say, oh, right, I'm now backing this other senator. And so, like in Roman times, senators could lose support really quickly for some sort of behaviour that people don't like. Now, unfortunately, what happened in Roman times, and is happening in our empire now, is one of the most successful things senators did was start wars, because it raised a lot of money and it meant they didn't have to raise taxes. Because the other thing is, when you sling your hook with a particular senator, you pay tax to them at the rate they determine. Now, a senator that's going and raising money by fighting wars and stealing stuff doesn't have to raise any taxes at all, and in fact can bring loads of benefits to those people that support them. Now, something similar happened in Roman times, and it's not desperately healthy because it encourages more and more wars. But it's the way senators typically got popular, and it's very disruptive to the long-term stability of their society. So looking at the sort of the whole wider environment, you think, how are people living in 3302? And, you've got this stratified society, and the players are essentially right at the top of it. They can afford to get around. They can afford to travel. And I think we see it today, but I think in a galaxy that's hugely varied, where there are lots of different places, people can find somewhere, I'm sure, that they may well be happy. You look at some of the idealists in the game. Look at the Utopia, one of the powers. That you'll see these sort of, if you like, pressures for people to move. So travel will be a big deal, and we're seeing that with passengers coming in 2.2, and all of the driving forces behind it. And we want to try and reveal as much of that as possible, so that when we see systems becoming destabilized, we'll see refugees coming from them. You can take those passengers away who want to leave because there are problems there. And you start to see the sort of more of the background. It's in the background simulation already. More of that coming to the fore, more of that being visible from a player's point of view. And I think that to me is very exciting. That we've also we've trying to sort of visualize what's happening in the back. We've got space lanes are now in there that people can see, but doing more and more with that and making what's happening in the game much more visible to people. So there's another aspect to this which is very sort of front and central to the gameplay anyway. You look at something like an Imperial warship, it's a great big ship, but you start to see some of the stratification there. If you imagine you're a Marine or essentially what we might call a grunt soldier, you're going to have a little grey cabin, probably with 4 or 6 bunks in it, and some metal tin that you eat your food out of, and some despicable smelling place that you do your business in. Whereas you see at the back top end of the ship this toroidal sort of cylindrical thing that rotates, which will have gravity inside it. You probably, for those who read the Galnet post, will talk about the people where that might be full of trees or utter luxury. Gravity itself will be quite a luxury in space, rather than just using magnetic boots or whatever. We have it in the stations. So, for example, in the stations, we've seen the Orbis stations, which obviously with the rings that you see out, you can see from out into space, but also designs for the interior of the Coriolis, where you've got the cylinder in the middle where you land, where you've got about 0.1 gravity, so gravity is quite low. But then outside that, you've got the sort of the boxy shape. Now inside that, we've got stepped terracing, so that you've got a giant open volume. Because these things, the density isn't all that high, but volume isn't an expensive thing. I mean, yes, it's filled with air, but that's not all that heavy. So you would have the feeling of open space. You would have one of the premises of the game, which I don't think is unreasonable at all, is that power is very cheap. We've got nuclear fusion, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to travel the vast distances you do. So you could have things that feel like natural light, and you'd have a day-night cycle internally that light the thing up. But terracing is a natural thing that we like because it gives a feeling of space without everyone feeling they're living on top of each other. But beneath that, you have this warren of where the people that serve these upper layers of society live, and probably get a bit cheesed off with the way they're treated. Hence we have uprisings and all this sort of thing. It's where the gameplay meets things that you can sort of empathise with, the feeling of real life, if you like.